Imagine going on a date to the movies in 1998 to see the absolute masterpiece of a film, The Truman Show. You're blown away by the concept and execution. Jim Carrey, who you've only seen in comedies up to this point, wildly exceeds your expectations with his dramatic performance in the titular role. The credits begin to roll, the lights come up, but you don't want to leave your seat. You wish it wasn't over. Then your date turns to you, looks you dead in the eye, and says, "If I was Truman, I would simply have whipped the schlong out. That would have made him cut to commercial." I spent years of my life in a weird, on-again, off-again, toxic relationship with Letterboxd. If you're unfamiliar, Letterboxd is a social cataloging app that allows you to log films you've watched, see what your friends are watching, and engage in usually lighthearted debate about movies. A lot of people really love this app. Some people hate it, most people fall somewhere in between, but skewed towards the positive side. As a filmmaker and entertainment and media studies major and self-proclaimed media nerd, this should be my favorite app in the world. Eventually though, I decided the app isn't really for me, and I have personally found the decision to part ways with Letterboxd has improved the way that I engage with movies. Now, please believe me when I say that this isn't a Letterboxd is bad video. I personally have struggled to engage with it in a healthy way, and have seen other people do the same. But if you use the app, my goal isn't for you to watch this video and then immediately go delete it. I mean, you can, but that's your choice. Absolutely nothing I say in this video will be true across the board. For a lot of people, the app is just a really fun way to track what you watch and discuss movies with your friends. Some people don't even use the app's social features. For them, it's just like a personal diary of the movies that they've watched and enjoyed, and that's completely valid as well. Some have even said that Letterboxd helps motivate them to watch more movies. There are a lot of different ways to go about it, so if you use the app and it enhances your love of movies, no need to feel any different about that based on what I have to say. But that's not how everyone uses Letterboxd. In fact, the way that some people engage with the app, and by extension engage with cinema as an art form, kind of drives me insane. And I'm included in this, by the way. The way I have engaged with the app historically has been detrimental to me and annoying to others. There's a decent chance that you, like me, use the app in some ways that negatively impact how you interact with cinema, so I would like to point out some of the pitfalls that I have experienced and observed. Let's get something out of the way. Social media is known to be incredibly addictive, and Letterboxd is social media adjacent. I say adjacent because it isn't technically, I guess, depending on who you ask. In fact, the majority of users don't think that it is, but it's obvious to me that it owes some of its basic functions and structural components to those popularized on social media platforms. That means if you're using the app socially, you're getting at least some of the addictive properties of traditional social media, even if it's not exactly the same in its nature or severity. And I just don't personally believe that engaging with art should always be a social thing. In Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence, Dr. Anna Lemke notes that one of the biggest risk factors for getting addicted to any drug is easy access to that drug. Knowing what we know about social media's drug-like properties, it's easy to apply that logic to platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Or X, but let's be real, Twitter. But what about Letterboxd? Is this enough of a social media to pose any potential problems? If so, it's very worth noting that we have remarkably easy access to it. But let's be real, are movies heroin? No. Does addiction to Letterboxd or movies or any form of media, social or otherwise, have the same real-world impact as, say, substance addiction? With the exception of pornography in some cases, not really. While these things should be taken seriously, we should also address them with a sense of perspective. Letterboxd doesn't ruin lives or break families apart, unless you're like really way too into it. On any social platform, unspoken rules and customs begin to form. I remember going on a trip to Mexico right after I got Instagram for the first time and posting on my story about it. A lot. See, I thought your story was kind of a dumping ground for things that didn't warrant a full post. I thought anything could go on your story, and any quantity, and the number of story posts didn't matter because people could just like swipe past the whole thing. Months later, one of my casual friends told me they almost muted my account because of this, and I had no idea that I was being insufferable or breaking an unspoken rule. There 100% are unspoken rules on Letterboxd if you want to look interesting and educated. People really reserve the 5-star review for very few movies because it isn't cool and mysterious to be overzealous and enjoy things too much, but your bell curve also shouldn't skew too low because then you're probably just pretentious or an asshole or something. You're only allowed a certain number of hot takes, that is, times where your opinion diverges from the popular one to a substantial degree. Most of the time you want to be with the crowd, but if you don't have any hot takes, you're boring and basic and your movie taste sucks. Your top 4 movies have to present some sort of variety. You can put like one ironic one in there, but only one, and only if you're the funny type. Maybe nobody else sees this, like maybe I'm going crazy. I can't cite any sources because this is all just vibes. These are unspoken rules after all. But it seems to me that when making a Letterboxd account, just like with any social media account, you're painting a picture of yourself that has to be flattering. And this is absolutely an exaggerated, cynical way of looking at it. But when you add this social element to people's consumption of art, you somewhat take away their ability to form completely unique opinions. There's now a pressure to have good taste, which can take precedence over having authentic taste. And this has always been a thing, but it's especially prevalent now. For a while, I had a terrible habit of opening Letterboxd immediately after watching a movie, like since I first got the app. Let's say the movie I watched, I knew it was in the 3 to 4 star range. I would decide whether it was going to be rated 3, 3.5, or 4 stars while reading other reviews. One particularly insightful criticism from someone else could bump my entire review down by half a star, even if I didn't make that observation myself. I know for a fact that I'm not the only one doing this, so if that sounds like you, I think you could fix this problem, not necessarily by deleting the app, but just by giving it a second. You know what I mean? Take in what you saw, form an opinion, and log the movie when you're ready. It doesn't even have to be the same day. Your opinion should be genuine. Once you have a genuine opinion, I think you're perfectly fine to engage with other people's opinions and thoughts, but when you're still in the process of forming an opinion and feelings about a film, especially a good film, you don't need outside influences on that process. Because like at a certain point, it's not entirely your opinion anymore. You're just trying to fall in the right spot on a bell curve. It has more to do with other people than it has to do with you and the art that you just engaged with. That's depressing. A more egregious version of this particular Letterboxd problem can be found on the app Airbuds, which I despise. It's a music app that tracks all of your listening activity on Spotify and shares it with your friends in real time. I could never even begin to use Airbuds. I do not want my friends to know how many times in a row I listen to Red Wine Supernova. And for some people, Airbuds is great and allows them to share their love of music with people they care about. If that's you, good for you. Like, 100%, like, I don't care if you enjoy it, but I personally don't get it. It just feels so invasive and personal. It's bad enough that I find myself thinking throughout the year about how my listening will impact my Spotify Wrapped, for example. Now I have to think about the fact that my friends will see every song that I play. No thank you, that's okay. I'm sure more of you identify with that example. This is a channel about movies and media, so plenty of you probably use Letterboxd. And to be fair, Letterboxd is a lot less invasive than Airbuds. It's not like linked to your Netflix account or anything like that. You log things of your own accord, but the pressure to log everything kind of makes this, to me, feel like an extension of this. Social validation and comparison are built into the very fabric of every social media platform, even the ones that you like and the ones that I like. But what if Letterboxd isn't the only problem here? What if, for some people, this is a part of a larger addiction? I mentioned earlier that Letterboxd encourages some users to watch more movies. Here's a question. Is watching more movies always good? I think we can all agree that watching no movies isn't the answer. I don't think most of us would advise staying glued to the screen 24/7 either. So people fall at various points on this spectrum in terms of what's best for them, and that's okay. In my opinion, if it's the difference between seeing 0 movies a week and 1 movie a week, that's pretty much always going to be a good thing. But what if it's the difference between 1 movie a day and 2 movies a day? as in like every day, is that still good? At what point do returns start to diminish? At what point are you robbing yourself of the ability to truly engage with the film, to let it sink in? The same can be, and often is, said for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Reels, television, you name it, but people don't tend to apply the same thinking to movies. And I think that's a mistake. At some point, watching as many movies as possible will reduce the amount of enjoyment you get out of watching each one. And even if movies aren't quite as addictive as, say, a social platform like TikTok, you can still rot your brain if you don't give yourself the time to live your real life in between sessions of entertainment. YouTuber Film for All made a great video called Don't Watch Movies, where he talks about the potential dangers of overindulgence, and I, from experience, have to agree with him. If you know anything about me, you know I love movies more than life itself, but humans just are not built to be entertained all the time. This isn't to say that Letterboxd forces all or even most of its viewers into a state of overconsumption and brain rot, but it's hard to imagine that that never happens. That just isn't loving cinema for the sake of loving cinema. You've now fallen victim to comparison, which, as we all know, is the proverbial thief of joy. The fun part of Letterboxd is that it makes watching movies feel like a game. The issue with Letterboxd is that it makes watching movies feel like a game. Before too long, your watch list has thousands of films you'll never watch in it, because the world of cinema is an open world video game that you can never win. This happened to me, and I felt so discouraged that I developed negative association with the app, so I would neglect to open it, I would get behind on my logging, then I started feeling bad about how behind I was on my logging, so I would get back to being really addicted to it for a little while, and then I would remember, oh, this app kind of makes me feel unpleasant things, so I started to resent it. Rinse and repeat. This vicious cycle of self-evaluation on Letterboxd dominated my movie-watching life, overshadowing the thing that really mattered to me: watching movies. There was a point in time before streaming or television or even physical media that you had to go to the movie theater to watch a movie. The novelty of the experience was a huge part of the appeal, and it was a huge driver of ticket sales. TV came along and really freaked the movie industry out for a little while, because with TV you could watch stuff more often, but you didn't really have much say over what you watched and when. With physical media, you can now watch pretty much anything whenever you want, but you're regulated in terms of location because you have to be able to play it, and you also have to have it in your collection or have it rented. But now, with just a few subscriptions, you can watch whatever, whenever, wherever, and usually you can do so for a comparatively low cost. That's mostly good, but it also makes us incredibly addiction prone. In Dopamine Nation, Dr. Lemke writes, "The world now offers a full complement of digital drugs that didn't exist before, or if they did exist, they now exist on digital platforms that have exponentially increased their potency and availability." I don't really think that anybody is addicted to Letterboxd on its own. The app serves as a complement as a person's addiction to entertainment. You can just tell, in my opinion, reading some reviews, that people are watching movies, spending the entire runtime trying to think of the best one-liner possible. That makes me sad as someone who loves and makes films. Just like there are people out there so addicted to Instagram that they're taking entire vacations thinking the whole time about the photo ops, there are people whose enjoyment of movies is tainted by the constant thought of getting likes on a silly little review. Now, I am not saying that these silly little reviews are overall bad or shouldn't exist, even when we're talking about more serious movies. I think we can all acknowledge that these things can be absolutely fucking hilarious. Even some of the reviews on my own movies are really, really funny to me. My girlfriend and I quote this one particular Love Lies Bleeding review every single time the movie comes up in conversation, but it sure does feel like this is becoming the whole app. I recently saw Nosferatu, and I really enjoyed it personally. The performances were impressive, the visuals were insane, and I've been a fan of the character ever since his SpongeBob cameo, so it was a great time. I left the theater with a sort of eerie, unsettled feeling, and as I was pondering what I watched, I decided to open my Nosferatu. Nosferatu. Now, while Nosferatu is funny, and that is objectively true, I'm not taking any counterpoints, it probably isn't the best thing that is the thought I had in my head before I was even leaving the building. Instead of letting the movie breathe, reflecting, trying to figure out how I felt about it overall, I was thinking about Hawks for Atua. As a filmmaker and huge lifelong fan of the movies in general, I strongly believe that this is an art form we're talking about. At the risk of sounding pretentious, because like, I know, I get it, like, look at me, but at the risk of sounding pretentious, these things matter. They can impact lives. Sure, some movies are silly and dumb and don't demand to be taken seriously, and that's also a perfectly valid form of entertainment. All of us love to engage with these things in some form or fashion. I even think that these types of movies are art, usually. But where is the line? When do we start to take things seriously? Ethel Cain's recent comments about the Irony Epidemic come to mind for me. It feels like we struggle, like so heavily, to resonate with art in an honest fashion, and to be open with ourselves about the fact that we resonated with a piece of art, that we have to drown ourselves in pithy one-liners and irony, even mere moments after watching a movie, even a movie that made a deep emotional impression, because we're scared to let ourselves feel things without outside interaction, or without, relieving the moment with humor. This person liked Nosferatu, possibly even loved it at a 4-star review, and the best they've got is Hawks for Atua. Where has sincerity gone? Do we have to be silly and ironic all the time? Where's the line? When can we be serious for a second? Are we too far gone to be unironic ever again? Everything I've just said contributed to my decision to delete my personal Letterboxd account. Again, if you use the app and manage to sidestep all of these issues and it enhances your love of movies rather than detracting from it or dominating it, you really don't have to take any of this to heart. I just wanted to put this out there because, like I said, I know for a fact I'm not the only one. Maybe try offloading it for a week, or maybe a month, or write down what movies you watch and your honest opinions on them, and decide if you want to re-download the app after a little while. Now, all that said, I actually do have a Letterboxd account. See, I love to hear directors candidly talk about their own work, especially when they do so in a critical light. It's great to hear the filmmakers I respect say very publicly what they are honestly thinking about their own work as it ages over time. So since I'm a filmmaker, I wanted to do that, if anybody happened to be interested. So I made a Letterboxd you can follow if you're a fan of my original filmmaking work and want to know what I think of it. I've reviewed some of my movies as low as 2.5 stars and plan to update my ratings each time I get a chance to rewatch. So if that sounds interesting to you, feel free to follow. If not, then don't. There is no right or wrong way to love movies. You don't have to love The Godfather, you don't have to dislike Madame Web, you don't have to own physical media, you don't have to go to the theaters, and most relevant to the point of today's video, you don't have to use a social platform to validate your love of movies. And if you do use said platform, you don't have to come up with funny one-liners, nor do you have to follow your friends or let your friends follow you. Frankly, what happens between you and the screen can just stay between you and the screen. And that's okay. So that is about it for today's video. I will see you in the next one. Until then, I'm Sam Morgan, and this is Pictures Up.